Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford, and I'm the creator of ComicBase. And I would normally say about the next hour, we'll be talking about tech problems, latest updates on ComicBase, and addressing any of your questions. But I'm going to try to make this one on the short side because I'm actually in the middle of a bunch of stuff, and I got to get out and finish up the stuff I'm working on. So anyway, if you do have questions, though, please put them in the chat to @ComicBaseTV. I will handle as many of them as I possibly can during this whole thing. But in the meantime, we're going to try to keep this one brief and to the point. I'm going to try to answer a bunch of tech questions that people have sent in and that have been people burning up our support lines with, and then we'll get on our way. Hope everyone is doing well. Anyway, it's gorgeous out here in Franklin, Tennessee. We're just outside Nashville. And I guess Richard Scott first in the chat here. Mike Beam, welcome. Rob Weinberg, of course, always to see you. Happy to see you. Greg Hector, our moderator, is in the house. So guys, all be on your best behavior, please. Tom Kilbreth, I can read. I swear to God, I can. From Northern Illinois is joining us here. In Oro Viejo, Department of Comics. Brian Price from Dallas, Texas. Looks like everyone. Oh, Jet City Comics, welcome everybody. So we will get down to it, everyone. So basically, brief comic-based news. Normally, I'm a big fan of interim updates because I like seeing every darn last little thing that we're working on. I'm going to say right now, if you don't need to download the very latest interim update, you might want to give it a day or two. Why would I say such a thing like that? It's because, as we mentioned before, we're always in kind of a perpetual release kind of cycle. So, we're always fixing things, adding things, whatever else. What we are working on right now, excuse me. Hey, on the second go around, I actually thought to mute the microphone. How about that? I'm getting to be like one of these podcasting professionals. At the very moment, what we are working on right now is a lot of stuff to try to make things faster. And in particular, we're working on some very, very thorny code around all the larger things that ComicBase ever does, rebuilding issue lists and things like that. And we're doing a lot of very, very clever, twitchy, technical work involving multi-threaded processes and parallel executions and all sorts of crazy things like that. And I'm going to say it's twitchy and exacting, and it's been a lot of late nights in my life, and there'll be another one tonight. And so the program normally is awfully stable, even in the worst of times. If there's like, okay, in this one little tiny area that we're working, there might be a little twitchy bug or two. I'm going to say right now, there's actually a few number of places where like, yeah, you don't want that one until tomorrow. So if you would normally, not like living on the cutting edge, give it a rest for a day till tomorrow. Whatever build you're running is probably just fine. And if you stumbled across anything a little weird and twitchy because you downloaded last night's update, we know, and we're working on it, and we'll have it fixed tonight. So anyway, that's about that. Welcome to the life of small business development. Anyway, so on the other hand, what other things have we actually been managing to accomplish lately in ComicBase? There's a number of them. So first of all, on the content side, we are in a huge stage of updatedness at this point. We have been updating the database to add in the newsstand versions for some 47,000 comic books. We actually even added in a bunch from Archie in this last go round. And we are rapidly filling in the pictures on all those as well, swapping over information, etc. If you would like to get involved in that and help out in the effort, we certainly appreciate it. If you just pull up your copy of ComicBase, and anytime you go down to a title and it's talking about the newsstand version, the /NS version, let me see if I can get to a appropriate title here. Actually, I want to go to not the new Spider-Man. Let's go to the let's see, Amazing Spider-Man. No, I can type. Sing Spider-Man. Oh Lord, I hope you guys are all doing well. It's been, like I say, a lot of late nights for me. All right, so if you go to, say, Amazing Spider-Man, the deal on newsstand, of course, is that starting in 1979, the direct market came out, and they started doing direct. They started needing to differentiate the direct market version of comic books versus the newsstand versions by putting different barcodes or not putting barcodes on them and so forth. Long story short, it's suddenly become important to the comic market that you'd start differentiating, was this, particular issue of a comic book you were looking at the newsstand or not the newsstand version. So if you were looking at copies the last couple of weeks, you might have noticed that suddenly you're perfectly filled in runs of Spider-Man and Green Lantern and all these other ones suddenly have got gaps in them now, which say things like here's issue 432 of the Amazing Spider-Man, but suddenly there's a 432 NS version that we don't have a picture for. And if that has happened to you, and if for whatever reason you feel in your heart that you would like to help us fill this sort of thing in, whether you're getting the information by scanning your own comic books or you're doing it by pulling from the Grand Comics database, which, by the way, they are cool with, and that's absolutely legit. The one way that you could do it is if you literally just pull up the files you'd like to do. Make sure if you're dragging from actually, thanks to a recent change in ComicBase, you don't even need to worry about what it was called. Just drag it straight onto the newsstand issue of the particular issue you'd like to drag the picture onto. If you hold down the Shift key, it'll actually move the picture in the process. So if you're dragging it from the desktop, it'll clean up where it was coming from, and it'll file it into your copy of ComicBase. You'll suddenly see the newsstand version of that picture will appear. At that point, if you would, and that we would very much appreciate you if you did this, just highlight the whole title if you want. Control A will select the whole title. That'll get all the issues of the title. Just right click and say submit new or corrected data to us, and then our correcting guys will get any, it'll say, hey, if you've got any new pictures that we haven't had, it'll tell us about that. If you've added any new information to the newsstand issues that you'd like us to know, barcodes, things like that, that will also come our way, and you'll get points and our thanks, of course. So please, if you want to be part of that effort, we expect we'll fill the whole thing in probably a couple of months, because it seems like we're getting a lot of help on that regard right now. But certainly anything you can do to help on that, we very much appreciate it. So basically drag in your own pictures, if you will, right click on that picture, say submit new or corrected data. So that's a right click, and then take it from there, and you should be good. All right, so getting back to things. All right, other things that have been new. So in ComicBase, one thing that we did to make this a lot easier on you if you are trying to get pictures from other places is you actually can drag straight from other web windows. So if there's a picture displaying on an auction site or your own listings or Grand Comics database, something that you'd like to add to your own database, literally you can just take it and drag it straight onto the grid, onto the issue you want to go to, and it will copy it straight from the web. And a very quick, rapid way of filling in new pictures. But again, if you do that sort of thing, please right-click, submit them to us. Do not send us watermark pictures. So if they're coming from some online site, Lone Star or things like that, where it's mycomicshop.com or something like that, where it's like they essentially putting their own stamp on the pictures, please don't send them to us. We can't use them. But again, Grand Comics Database is a terrific resource. Your own cover scans, of course, are the best. And we certainly appreciate that, because then we can push it on to the update and they go to everybody, and it just makes the whole thing so much better. All right. The other things that we have been doing lately, speaking of pictures, one of the reasons that we're pounding so very, very hard on making things fast in ComicBase is because the longest thing that ComicBase will ever do in its life is something you guys will never actually see. It's something we only do internally, and that's when we package up about 4 million pictures. It's a crazy number, but that is the actual number. And we put them out for everybody to be able to use in different versions of the program and different online Atomic Avenue, things like that. But basically we start with 1.1 million picture files in the archive edition, and then they get packaged up in different forms, compressed to different ratios for Blu-ray or things like or archive and so forth. But yes, just a fanatical amount of picture handling. And honestly, we used to have a dedicated computer that spent an entire week whenever we need to update the picture archives from scratch. Something which we would do if, I don't know, suddenly you had to go back and revisit whether all the pictures you had for some don't know, 25 years worth of comic books where suddenly do I have a picture of the newsstand version or the regular version? Something that we've never had to worry about before. Not that I'm bitter. But anyway, when you have to go from the start and flesh out the whole thing and start from the scratch, yeah, it's like a fairly fast computer and a fairly fast SSDs cranking for a solid week to get that all together. And we actually managed to get it through a lot of programming, so we can now cycle time that entire thing, and we can get the whole thing done in about 2 3/4 hours, which is I'm really, really happy. I mean, you can practically see the smoke coming off of the computer that's doing it right now, but it's a huge increase in performance, and we're hoping. And this is why ComicBase is a little messy right now. We're hoping to use that same kind of magic to make certain things in ComicBase faster. And we're starting out with really the longest thing that any of you will be using in anything like a regular basis, which is rebuilding issue lists. But already we've done improvements to just the way pictures are handled, conditions, and so forth. Where yes, right now unless you're doing something very long, or you have a very slow computer, the difference right now is fractions of a second. You might not even feel it. We can measure it, but we certainly can measure it when we do it 4 million times. But anyway, we're trying to roll some of these improvements out there. We have actually cut off something like 15% off of the rebuild time as of yesterday, and then we started doing some other stuff that might get us a little further on things. But we're seeing what we can do, and certainly the ultimate goal is we want to make it so that you can use ComicBase and never, no matter how bogged down your computer is, no matter how much stuff you're working with, it'd be really kind of cool if you made so you never got that wonderful Windows "the program is not responding" message because your disk is thrashing too hard to update the interface, which is really what all that means. But if we can make that happen, we're gonna. But yeah, a little bit of messiness in the meantime, but we hope to get through it on the other side. All right, let me see. I've been japping for a minute, so let me check the chat here on things. Let's see. So, has anyone smashed the like? Oh, well, I'm sorry. Yes, everyone, please, if you like this sort of thing, please hit that like button and hit the subscribe, please, and also give us a follow over on X. I guess are you required to say X, formerly Twitter, as if people don't know by now? I think it's been X for like 3 years now. Anyway, so on X, go ahead and give us a follow over on ComicBase or Comic Software over there, and yeah, because we try to occasionally put out stuff there. We actually have some auction reports for some really cool stuff coming out later on this week that you'll be seeing on there if you're a subscriber to us over there. Well, you don't have to subscribe, just give us a follow. All right. Question said, ComicBase TV mobile app. Yes, we're working on it. Yeah, honestly, the pictures of all things, there's a bit of a snowballing in our lives. I don't know if you're getting this, in that one thing is the fix always said one thing leads to another. So we had in our mind 6 weeks or so ago that we were going to put out, okay, let's take all the improvements we've been working on for the last couple months. Let's just tie a bow on them, get them out the door. That'll be great. And this eventually became what you guys know as ComicBase 2025 version 25.6, which was pretty cool. It did a lot of things. It did that, that newsstand thing we were talking about and so forth. But let's start like this. It's like, okay, we've written some neat code for doing auto matching of items at the end of updates. So like if an update, if something changes category, a famous one that we always see in people's files is the official handbook of the Marvel Universe or the official Marvel index to the X-Men, things like that, which even though they're comic books, they are technically classified as magazines because they carry no comic related material in them. And because one of our customers is actually the Guinness World Record holder for the largest comic book collection, it's very important for all concerned and who are interested in this sort of thing that we use the Guinness definition of what a comic book is. So it's not about the size, it's about what's in the pages. And so comic book it is. But anyway, a great many people over the years have, the stuff was listed in different places as a lesser factor. Sometimes things change names just for reasons just we have to do. Is it originally goes in ComicBase as one thing, you might have put some inventory into it, but then they decide by issue 2, oh no, we didn't mean it. No, really, we've changed the name of the title, and we kind of have to retroactively change what the title was called, usually like adding a comma or a the or something really fantastic like that. It's not like on the silent seas, it's on silent seas. Okay, got it, right. So we make the change, but if you update your inventory, you'll see that, oh yeah, I've now got an orphan item here. It doesn't seem to belong anywhere. I've got the listing because I put it in my inventory, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere in the database because we changed the official designation. Now, granted, we have 1.3 million comics in the database. We have 4 million other items of different types in the whole thing. So there's a lot of stuff. So even if a tiny number of them change, and we really try to avoid this sort of thing because it's a pain in the butt, it can add up over time. So you'll see some with a database that's been, not, synced up for a year. You download the latest update. This is like, yeah, here's a couple dozen items in your vast collection that have changed names of sort. In the old day, what you used to have to do is you have to go through each one and say, okay, let's see, we have Elric on Silent Seas. There's a new title called Elric on the Silent Seas, or whichever way it went, I forget now. And you can say, oh yeah, transfer it over to the other title, and then lather, rinse, repeat for the other 23 items that were in the mismatch list. Now, some people, I understand, have lives. I can't speak for this from firsthand experience, but if you are one of these people who have a life, there's a good chance you've never felt sufficiently type A that you needed to go through your list and resolve 24 obscurely named items in a large comic book collection to make sure they have the exactly right name. But so you might have had these items just hanging out there forever, and they're not getting price updates, and they're not doing all things like that. It's a less than optimal situation. Well, we had this genius idea that, okay, what if we added a feature? And I had a little time on my hands, and I said, what if, literally going to work at one Saturday, and I said, what if we sat down there and we said, okay, for all the items there in people's unknown items list, what if we went through and said, okay, is there a single item which isn't that item with exactly the same barcode listed someplace else? If so, it's a lead pipe cinch that thing it's changed its name and it really belongs over there. At which point we could just put a note in the log and say, okay, on Silent Seas #1 is really on the Silent Seas #1. Change the name, move her, done and dusted, and as they say, you're either in like Flint or you're home and dry. It depends on whether you're an old 1950s, American person or 1950s, English person. Anyway, but Bob's your uncle and your home's home and dry and so forth. That'd be good. We also could handle things using the same kind of idea of, did something change its designation? Was it, you do have it listed as a comic book, but it's really a magazine? We could, change the series type for you and so forth. Now, if we didn't find it exactly by a barcode match, we could look for just one or so other ways. We could say, is there exactly the same title and issue existing in a different media type? Is there exactly the same title and issue stripped of punctuation under the same media type? If so, then something got or lost a comma along the way, and so we can go ahead and automatically move that over with a great deal of confidence and so forth. Now, we thought, okay, this is a neat little feature, and it took us, a couple days to put it together. We were pretty happy with it. Ran a whole bunch of test databases with it. We thought, okay, this is good. Ran my own database with it, and suddenly, hey, I don't need to have this weird little 5-minute long cleanup chore every month or so of moving items around, and I felt a little bit happier about my life. And then we put it in the back burner and thought, okay, we'll get around to releasing this whenever. We had another feature which was kind of related, but not exactly, which was we wanted to make it easier for people to come in from other programs, whether it's CLZ or Cover Price or any of these other things like that. I mean, there's other programs in the world, and one of the problems in there is, even if you got this program, you started putting it in your books, and you realize, oh, this thing's a piece of crap, I got to get out of here. You were kind of locked in many cases by the damn variant situation, where, because everything is its own bizarro custom variant these days, and there's no real unanimity of, if somebody's Green Lantern 7th series number 7A could be someone else's Green Lantern volume 7 7B, right? There's a lot of worry about this, and so just because even if you can, are in a program that lets you export your data, unless you want to go and look at it all again, again, you could be deeply unhappy with the program you're at, but it was really hard to match it to another program. And so a lot of times people call up and say like, oh man, do I have to really enter all my stuff in again? And I say, well, as a barcode scanner, you can make it easy. But, it's like, yeah, I don't care how easy it is. No one wants to do work twice. But because of this bizarre variant system that's going on here. There's really no automated way that anyone could think of how to say guarantee that one guy's Green Lantern Volume 7 7B is the proper Green Lantern 7th series number 7A. I mean, you have to be able to do that match with a great deal of confidence. Otherwise, you're kind of hosed, because what? Last thing you do is want to screw up somebody's inventory. Well, we ran an experiment actually about a year ago, saying how far can we push this? So in other words, what things can you do to try to auto match people, to make it easier to go from one place to another? And we tried different factors, different things. And eventually what we hit upon was the idea of like, well, what you really want to do is you want to let the user set a confidence level. Say, look, I either want you to be incredibly confident, and in which case you're going for things like exact barcode matches and exact title and issue number matches, at which point, with very high level of confidence that, yeah, this thing is exactly a match. But you want to have, here's a list of ones I definitely matched, and here's ones I probably matched or maybe didn't match. I'm not really sure. And I can hand match these ones. I can either say, well, the probable match is over here, in which case you just import that file in, or you could say, yeah, I'll go through that list separately, but at least most of my work's done. So most is better than nothing. And we thought, okay, can we put that together with the techniques we worked out for the auto matching as we went, and make them a little better? And we actually did make them a little better. It was pretty slick, and we're pretty happy with all that went out. And then we're like, okay, great, we can ship next week. And then we imported a bunch of files, and we realized, oh my god, a lot of these other programs, including CLZ and everything, have really gone in on the newsstand issue. And so that forced the entire newsstand issue, which, if you've been watching the live streams, has been dominating our discussion for the last month and a half. So I won't belabor it any further than I've already done. But suddenly it became like, well, okay, we better ship the newsstand thing in ComicBase before we roll out any of this stuff. So a couple weeks ago, we put the whole package together finally. Everything's all tied up with a bow, as well as a bunch of other nice things we did to the program in the meantime. And so we were able to finally put that whole thing together. So that's what we've been up to. And so now we've also managed to update all our picture sets and do things like that. And we're finally looking forward to having kind of a fun summer. But getting back to the original question, so how's the mobile app going? Well, the mobile app was going just fine until we dropped everything and did all that stuff. So we're trying to get back to the mobile app right now. And the good news is we have some heavier hitting in terms of the programming on that one. And we are going to be doing some neat new things with it, but it's not done yet. We will keep you posted the second we know. But anyway, thank you for asking. That's the longest answer you've ever heard to a question you didn't really want to know about. All right, so let's see here. Department of Commerce says, if I turn off the newsstand, will it still show the issues I have in stock? Yes, it does, actually. Let me go ahead and demo that right now. So if we bounce over to my other demo computer over here, which, by the way, I'll have a few things to say about demo computers in a moment. But let's go down to the area, say, Amazing Spider-Man, where I have all my newsstands at. All right, so yeah, okay, here. All right, so we see down here now every other one has a newsstand. There's a bunch of controls down here at the bottom as to whether or not you want to include the newsstands in your list or not, because a lot of people do not want to play as far as the newsstand goes. So if I say hide the newsstand, what it is explicitly doing is it's hiding any newsstand version that you don't have in stock. So if you have them in stock, if I had quantity 1 on any of these ones, you see how my lists are now much nicer and tighter. But if any of my newsstand ones had been listed in stock, they would also appear in there. So yes, you can still see your full collection, even if you decide I generally don't want to see the newsstand stuff separately. So that's what that's all about. All right, let's question here. Okay, Tyler T. Hey, welcome from Albany, New York. Cold, 39 degrees. Whoa, dude, what is going on out there? It's like 77. I'm like firing up the barbecue this weekend. All right, anyway, so let me see here. And Rich said, "OP, what did I say?" Okay. Follow you just on X. Life, what's a life? Newsstand. Okay, great. And with some kind of emoji, it's like boogity boogities on it for newsstand. I don't know what that is. By the way, I found out just today that I was yesterday, days old, when I found out there is such a thing as a zombie emoji, which turns out that comes up in conversation these days as you're texting your daughter. Don't Don't judge. Anyway, so other things that are going on. In terms of our actual production work, yes, the drag and drop stuff we talked about, the new stamp we talked about. We talked about everything we do with 25.6.1, the mobile app, and everything. And updates are definitely getting faster, as well as probably content updates. Now, content updates are usually pretty fast, but we think we might be able to take 10-20% off them, possibly, but we'll see. But we're definitely very, very happy about the taking like a factor of like 25 or so off of how long it took us to package together picture archives, which means it's much easier for us to keep those things downloaded. So, by the way, and so let's use this as our segue for if you're installing ComicBase on a brand new machine, and if you're moving ComicBase over to a machine, what the heck do you do? All right, let's go ahead and use this as segue point and bounce over here. All right, so actually, one more thing. All right, so if you're installing ComicBase on a brand new machine, pretty easy, all things considered. Start out, either buy or download the free version of ComicBase. Double-click the installer. For some reason, that is actually something that bears doing. Just because you've downloaded the installer does not mean that you've run the installer. So yes, when you download the program, you have to double click and actually run the ComicBase setup program. You'll see at which point it will install ComicBase. Use the defaults. I'm going to say, just in this day and age, unless you have a very specialized situation, use the defaults. You don't want to install it on a weird machine or a different thing like that unless you have something very strange happening in your life. And if you do, hopefully you know your machine enough that you can cope with the upside of that one. But the only time in the past I would have said something other than use the defaults is when SSDs were starting to become a thing. SSD is a solid state disk drive, basically using memory as opposed to a kind of memory that once you write to it, it keeps its charge when you turn it off. So what used to happen is those things used to be crazy expensive. So 10 years ago, if you wanted an SSD, you'd be out several $100 for a tiny one with like 256 gigs of space on it. Nowadays, a 2 terabyte SSD can be had for $80, like a really nice 2 terabyte SSD. So two things. One, there is no reason on God's green earth to not get an SSD in your computer. I cannot think of one. If you want a mechanical hard drive, you have just crazy amounts of things you want to back up. Absolutely buy a mechanical hard drive too, but absolutely make it so your boot drive is an SSD with enough space for all your programs, all your data that you are going to use frequently. And then if you just edit large video files or do crazy things like that, go ahead and archive them off to your magnetic drive for other things like that. But make sure your main drive has a decent sized SSD. So the machine that we demo on, which I really wish I had a camera that I could easily point you to, note to self, get that PTZ camera this year. Because which case, then I could PTZ a point pan tilt zoom camera. So I could set up something that just literally just zooms down right out of camera range here. So I could show you some of the setup stuff I have going on here, which, yeah, I'm going to need to make that happen. But anyway, the thing that we're demoing ComicBase on right now is not the most buff computer that we could possibly think of. No, it's just about the cheapest computer we could ever think of, which is it's from a company called Ace Magician. They go by acemagic.com on the interwebs. And it's just a cute little Ryzen-based, I think it's a Ryzen 7-based machine. And we bought it for like $280. It's the upgrade from a previous one where we were trying to figure out what is the cheapest possible machine that runs ComicBase acceptably, because there was a machine about the size of a hockey puck, cost $129, which Ace Magician also sells, turned out if you run ComicBase and pretty much nothing else, it runs just fine. And that was $129. So that, that's a thing that can happen. But we thought, well, okay, that was great. But then, it's a little bit of a killjoy if you're running ComicBase and also streaming to the web and doing other things like that. Let's see what spending twice as much will get us. So we spent $280, and we got ourselves a Ryzen 7-based thing with it's like a 32 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD built in. That's for $289. So I've had a couple of opportunities this last week I'm helping people with their machines, and I don't get paid by Ace Magician or any of this stuff. I'm just saying, use that as a comparison point when you're looking at your next machine if you're in the market for a machine, and don't buy anything worse than that $289 machine from Ace Magician, because the Ace Magician one is just fine, and for God's sake, it was under $300. I mean, what more do you want? So anyway, that's what we're running on right now. So with that said, yes, definitely get yourself an SSD regardless of what's going on. There's no excuse for anything else. Definitely get yourself 16, really 32 gigs of RAM. There's no excuse for anything else less these days. But after that, you really don't need a ton of computer to run ComicBase acceptably. So by all means, go ahead and do that. And now I'm trying to remember what the heck I was talking about before this. I'm trying to make it my note. So moving ComicBase to your new computer. Yeah, that's what it was. So when you've got ComicBase and you're putting on your brand new machine here, let me put myself back in the frame here. The very first thing you want to do is install onto your regular C drive. And again, you don't want to worry about anything other than C, because your C drive is big enough now, because you bought at least like a 250, 512 or 1 gigabyte SSD, because there's no reason not to buy anything, less than that, these days. So install into the C drive. And at that point, the very first thing ComicBase will ask you when you boot it up is it'll say, hey, well, one of two things, fabulous things will happen. The first thing is it'll say, like, oh, hey, there's a bunch of pictures that come with ComicBase now. Do you want me to install them? And the answer, of course, is yes. At that point, the only thing you should definitely worry about is if your internet speed is not tremendous. So if you're out in the boonies somewhere with really slow internet, just make sure that you hang on, or at least set your computer so it doesn't power cycle down during the time it takes to download, depending on your version of ComicBase, between 5 and 12 gigabytes of data. Now, we can serve this data up to you in about 5 minutes if you've got the speed for it, but if you're out in the boonies and you don't, at least just set your power settings on your computer such that it's not going to go to sleep in the middle of the transfer. Otherwise, you'll get to the end, it'll say, yeah, there was a problem transferring the pictures. The next time you launch ComicBase, it'll say, like, yeah, I still don't have the pictures. Do you want to install the pictures? At which point, you'll have to go through the whole rigmarole again. So, but anyway, normally though, if, like, let's say we're out in the normal parts of the universe where you've got decent internet, you've got a decent computer, you're looking at something like between 5 and 15 minutes to go from I had no ComicBase whatsoever on my machine to I'm up running and I'm rocking everything with looking at 1.1 million pictures on the archive edition. So, I mean, it really doesn't solve very quickly these days. Just use the defaults and you will be fine on that. The next thing you'll have, on the other hand, is you'll have a question of, well, what if I'm not coming in from a brand new ComicBase? What if I'm coming in from, I had ComicBase on my old machine? How do I get it over? All right, well, if you've been using ComicBase 2025, good news. There's an excellent chance that if you have been using it on a decent computer, that if you look under, actually, let me show you this one, because this bears looking at. If you look under Setup and go to Preferences, there's a couple settings that we introduced last time. Oh, sorry, let me go to pull up my magnifier so we can actually see things on here. Okay, so if we look down here in the middle of Preferences, you'll notice that there's some options here around saving backups. Now, the default is that it's automatically going to save a backup when you close the program. Every time it'll say it right on your hard disk. It'll save 5 of them, and after which time it'll recycle and start using writing over the last one. But depending on whether or not your computer is very powerful or not, so if it is 8 or more processor threads available to it, it's going to turn on by default the option to compress the backup files to save space. If it doesn't have that turned on, and you think your computer's reasonably buff, go ahead and turn it on, because it'll take it from the database taking about 1.5 2 gigs of space on your hard drive to taking about a fifth of that. And so it's a nice thing to do. The other thing is, if you set it to compress files, backup files to save space, it'll also turn on the option to automatically save to the cloud. This is pretty dang nifty if you've got that, because what that does is you've got set to automatically save to the cloud. Every time you exit the program, it will automatically basically queue up your backup to get saved up just in the background. You could be doing other things with your machine, but if you're watching, you'll notice the Sidekick kind of kicks on in the background, and it'll be spooling up your backup to the cloud, just as you're going and just doing anything else, reading email, browsing the web, whatever else. And if it does that to the cloud, 2 wonderful things happen. One is you have a backup someplace which isn't your machine, which is always good. And then also it updates all your mobile stats. So if you're looking at the ComicBase mobile app and everything, you'll notice that it's always up to date. Well, I lied. There's 3 wonderful things it does, because, and now we cycle back to the original question, if it's always backed up your latest stuff, and you're walking over to a brand new machine, so you've been using that feature and you're on the brand new version of ComicBase, it'll actually say, hey, I noticed you're storing on a new machine and you don't have a database, but I've got a database in the cloud from 30 minutes ago or the last time you used your old machine. Do you want to use that one? And if you say yes, it downloads that back if you just did, opens it up, spools it up, you're right back where you were, and you're ready to rock. There's really nothing to it. It's simple as could be. So I'd say right now, please go ahead and check your preference settings and see whether or not you've got that, automatically compressed backups turned on. And if your internet allows, go ahead and say automatically save to cloud. Now, I say if your internet allows because it is pushing a several hundred megabyte file to the web. So if you're on the back of beyond, you have miserable internet, and particularly if you have miserable up speed on your internet. Some people have very good down speed, like for watching Netflix, and really terrible up speed. If that applies to you, and you can check this, by the way, if you go to speedtest.net, it's a great way to find out how fast your internet actually is. If you do have like really kind of rotten, and by rotten, I mean probably 20, 30 megs or less up speed, probably I'm going to say turn off the automatically save to cloud because it's just going to take too long. Even though you can be doing other things with your machine, you don't want to wait 40 minutes for it to save a file. But if it's at all reasonable, I would say turn that on because it's just helpful in so many ways if that applies to you. Anyway, so if that worked for you, New Machine is a piece of cake. There's really nothing else for you to do at that point. But if you didn't, so if for whatever reason, if you either didn't have a cloud backup, or just it just doesn't apply to you, then you need some way of getting your data from your old machine to your new machine. The easiest way to do that is with a USB drive, something like this. This is a ludicrously large one by today's standards. A lot of the current ones look something like kind of like. They look like this, it's just the top. But anyway, but you need one with at least who am I kidding? Anything that's modern, it'll fit a ComicBase database on it. But what I would do is you need probably at least 4 gigs of room on your drive. So if your USB drive is less than 30 years old, it'll probably fit. But stick that in your current computer. Go to ComicBase. I switch back to the demo machine over here. And from your current machine's ComicBase, go ahead and shrink that down. Go ahead with, so be looking at your database, make sure you got the right one so there's no doubts about whatsoever, okay? And then say File, Save a Copy. And at that point, it's going to say, where do you want to save it to? Direct it over to your USB drive. So that's going to be, if you look at the drives on your computer, that'll, go ahead and stick this drive in here. If I could, I probably can't do that without knocking over half my audio setup as of right now, but they'll probably be like your D or your E drive. You'll see it on there. Just save it to the, save it over to that drive on your old machine. At that point, eject the drive. So when you get back in Windows, there'll be a little thing sticking down here at the bottom, which will, which has this guy right down here. Let's see if I can make it visible. It looks like, I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I think it's supposed to look like a USB drive. But if you click on that, it'll give you the option to safely remove the hardware and eject media. Do that. It's kind of really important. The reason you want to use that and not just pull the dang thing out is because every once in a while your computer is trying to be very efficient for you and it hasn't actually written everything down to the disk yet. It's just kind of waiting until the right opportunity comes down, and you want to, saying eject tells it, hey, anything you were thinking about writing to that drive, write it now, buddy, because I want everything that I had coming to me. So you want to make sure you get to kick it out without having the thing in kind of a weird state. So do eject it, then basically just take it over to your new machine, copy it into, and there's let's go ahead and just make life easier on ourselves. You want to put it in the default location. What is the default location, you say? The default location is on your C drive. You'll see that it has a folder called ComicBase. Inside the ComicBase folder is a folder called ComicBase Databases. Copy your thing right back into here. And then finally, when you save that backup, if it says something like backup, this date, that date, the other thing, or copy of this thing or that thing, click on it, rename it, and call it just something like, Pete's New Comics, whatever the thing was, just without the backup notation. So at that point, All you got to do, double click on that, ComicBase will open, you'll see your data, and you are good to go. All right, last tiny little point about all this stuff, because this one came up in just kind of, it's kind of a strange little regressive case, but yeah, I guess it can happen. Depending on what version of ComicBase you've been using, we've been making this whole process a little bit slicker over the years of how to do things, but it's possible that you had a whole ton of pictures on your old hard drive that you didn't copy over yet, or for some reason you didn't install the new pictures or whatever else. If that happens to you, you could in theory get in a situation where your database is used to living on a disk with all the old pictures on it, and it knows that they're all the big versions and so forth. And so because it's expecting to see them there, until you actually go to another title and it notices the picture isn't there, or you click on it, you give you a chance to realize that, wait, I don't have anything bigger than that. You might actually, your database might be telling you that it might be confused about whether or not you have the big pictures on your drive or not. So if you didn't copy over your pictures as well from the old machine, one thing you might possibly want to do, if you notice pictures aren't downloading in larger sizes for you, go to the file menu, go to File Tools, and click on Manage Pictures and Movies. And at that point, just click the reset button. What that's going to do is it's going to, in this case, it'll both reset where I'm getting my pictures from, but more importantly, it'll also nuke out all the references to stored pictures that my database ever had. So as far as my database knows, it has no pictures until it goes to the title and sees it. It's the very first thing it did is it said, well, I'm on Spider-Man, let me look at Spider-Man, and it immediately started scanning down the title, looking for what's on the hard drive and finding whatever pictures are resident. But until that moment, unless you reset that, it's possible you got yourself in a state where it's out of sync with what pictures are actually on your machine. So worth doing if you find you're having trouble downloading pictures, is just as a weird power tip. Now, we do try to make sure we reset that at all the obvious points, but if somehow you have gotten a database where it thinks you've got big pictures and you don't, that would be the answer for you right there, is go ahead and move that, reset those pictures there. All right, that was the longest possible version of that answer. I think that might be a new record for me, but I think we're going to do it. All right, so we talked about that one, and Dave, who asked that question, I hope that one helps you out. If you don't, please give us a call. All right, clean up database files, another one that has come up. So you might have noticed, so let's go back to our database folder over there, that we have so this is my demo folder here. So so I've got a bunch of junk on here, right? I've got I've got a free ComicBase database that I was testing with. I've got a copy of my master database. I've got some backups of the my collection database. I've got Pete's comics that I just made over there, et cetera, and so forth. By the way, if you see these -shm and -wal files, those are just working files. They exit when the ComicBase is done. Oh, excellent. The neighbors have their car alarm. Anyway, so don't worry about those. Don't touch those files, by the way, if you're mucking about. But if it ever occurs to you that, like, say, hey, I've got a lot of ComicBase foo on my computer, I'd like to clean some of it up. How do I do this? Well, there's a couple of things to do. One is you'll want to go ahead, go to the File menu, and launch File Tools, and launch a thing called the ComicBase Database Manager. All right, what is this thing? It's a special utility which we actually had written for us one summer by one of our interns, and it does just one thing in life. So it's done backing up here. Give me just a second. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I opened a couple databases. Now it's going to back up two things. I'm going to vamp for a minute. All right. So put myself in the screen here. So, right. Again, I did mention this is just about the cheapest computer money could buy. So it's taking ever so slightly longer than probably your buff computer at home is, but that's all right. We're getting there. Anyway, so the database manager is going to launch here in a second. And what it does, what it's going to do is it's going to scan my whole hard drive. And what it's going to do, there we go, is it's going to look for anything that looks like a ComicBase database, tell me where it is and kind of what's in it. It's going to count the number of comic books in it. The reason you need to do that is because it's really, really, you can't tell what's in a database by looking at the file size. You just can't. And so what this will do is once it goes down the list here and says, all right, well, okay, the one in bold, that's the one you were working with, is your main database beforehand. It's when it launches, when ComicBase launches. That one is got 4,336 comic books in it for an estimated street value of $343,000, etc. And I got a bunch of other ones with zero in them. Now, of course, me, some of these I mean to be zero, but maybe you don't. Maybe you have copies of the stock database that came with ComicBase. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, like, what is this junk? Get it off of my machine. Well, this is kind of the cool part is that you can actually just go there and you don't even have to wait for this thing to finish. You can just go click on the one you don't want here and just say, yeah, blow that database away. Make it gone. And it will go ahead and delete it. But yeah, well, you can do it. Can't do it while it's writing. But anyway, but yes, but yeah, let the Go thing go here. If you let it scan, it'll actually scan every drive that's attached to your computer. At which point, go ahead and just delete anything you don't want. Don't delete your main database. That's the only thing I say is don't delete your main database. So if you're seeing this, the one with all your comics in it, don't blow it away, and probably leave the other backups of your main database. Leave them alone too. Everything else, hey, it's your computer. It's fair game. Go ahead and nuke whatever you want, and that will help clean up your life some. Another question we get a lot is, hey, I've been installing ComicBase for the last 17 million years. I have old versions of ComicBase, maybe some files that I didn't clean up, things like that. Can I get rid of it? And the answer is absolutely yes. If it's not called ComicBase 2025 or it's not in the ComicBase 2025 install folder, you pretty much don't need it. Now remember, the one critical thing that you need to save is your ComicBase database. That's the whole ball game. You can install everything else, but your ComicBase database is that's where all your stuff is at. You can blow away pictures, you can blow away old log files, you can blow anything else. You can always reinstall that stuff again. But you need your database. So save your database, make sure you back it up to the cloud, just whatever else. But if at the end of all that stuff, you're going around and you say, hey, look, I want to go and I want to find old versions of ComicBase and just get rid of them, by all means, feel free to do that. Just the way you do it is you go down here, click on your start menu. It's a little sluggish, and if you type the word programs, it will eventually take you to the Windows Add and Remove Programs. At which point, it will show you everything that's installed on your machine. And anything that's called ComicBase, which isn't part of ComicBase 2025, yeah, go ahead and get rid of it. So I've got ComicBase 25. I've used this to demo a couple different versions of ComicBase. By the way, if you're ever wondering what's the difference between ComicBase 2025 resources and ComicBase 2025 basic resources, the answer is the version of ComicBase you were running. So if you have the free or express, you'll have the basic resources. If you have the pro or better, you'll have the other one. But if you have these files from ComicBase 2024, 2020, 2017, any of that stuff, yeah, feel free to nuke them. In general, they'll get automatically uninstalled when you install new versions of the program. But if depending on things, maybe that uninstaller didn't run properly, whatever else, feel free to get rid of it that way. Now, something that can happen, and I saw this a couple times this last week, is let's say you got an old machine and it's been getting just a little crusty, like just things have started to go a little bit weird with it over time. And so you might have noticed that you've got like little fragments of stuff that can't really be uninstalled. So you'll have like I don't know, like it could be like a ComicBase 2017 file. When you go to click to uninstall, it'll say like, hey, I can't run the uninstaller file. I can't find some file or something, which basically means that the part of Windows that was there to keep track of what files are where and things like that is just got a little out of sync and it's confused. This happens to everyone. It happens to every program if you do it long enough, because Windows just has glitchy things that happen to computers over a long period of time. In which case, I'm going to give my recommendation to a program called Revo Uninstaller. This is not a official ComicBase recommendation. This is an official Pete recommendation. So if for some reason it doesn't work, just say, hey, well, Pete said it. But don't sue ComicBase, please. But anyway, that being said, wow, I've used this sucker a lot of times over the years, and boy, is it really pretty great. So if I say Revo Uninstaller free, and if you look for this one, they do make a pro version. It's really, really cheap, and it's even a little bit better. But the free version, I got to say, this is one little hint for all you people who are making uninstallers in the world. People at Revo, you're either very generous people or you're either very poor businessmen because you made your free version too good. So yes, if you download the free version of Revo Uninstaller, what it will do is it will actually go look at all your installed programs and say, hey, I see that you've got a bunch of programs. Did you want to get rid of them? And if you do that, it'll actually try to run the uninstaller for them regularly, and if that fails, it'll say that, well, that one didn't work, so do you want me to just get rid of it anyway? And it'll tell you all the extra foo that it left laying around your machine. You select it all, you hit delete, and then that stuff vanishes from your from your disk and from your repair list. It works like a charm. Like I say, highest possible recommendation. It's fantastic. It doesn't need to just be ComicBase. It could be like that weird antivirus software program that seemed like a good idea to download one weekend that just will not uninstall. Whatever the thing was, Revo is a terrific program for getting rid of that stuff. Like I say, the only thing I care that you don't delete is do not delete your active database. So anyway, that's about it. Oh, by the way, we're hitting the top of the hour here, so PSAs assemble. Yes, well done. Do not forget to hit the like and subscribe if this is the sort of thing you do. And if you're watching post live stream, please leave comments. That really does help us so very much. Don't forget that we have a message board at forums.comicbase.com, and also a dedicated thread on ComicBase message boards where you can request live stream topics and demos, as well as see Andre's fantastic ComicBase cover gallery, which he's probably got to get an update to, because, man, did we push a lot of new pictures out there. And once we fill out the rest of these newsstand things, it's going to be even bigger. So that'll be pretty cool. All right, let's see what else is going on here. ComicBase TV, the logs take up a lot of space as well. Couldn't figure out where it was about having 30 gigs on my main drive. I came to find out it was all the update logs. That's a lot of updating, dude. I'm not exactly certain how you get 30 gigs of update logs, because if you've ever looked through what the update logs look like, I mean, let's go browsing for a minute. I mean, I'm either really impressed or it's something else, but let's have a look. So if you've ever wondered where ComicBase update logs are, they used to be stored elsewhere, which might be part of the quest of the problem. But if you're looking for them these days, and you see this thing is still running, I'm just go ahead and say stop just so I can get some performance back from my machine. So if we go browsing around on your machine here, you'll notice that it's either the last version or the last version before that, we started just writing all this kind of stuff down to just, there's a C ComicBase folder. We're just keeping it easy. And so inside C ComicBase, you'll see there's a logs folder. And this is typically where we'll write logs for every time you download updates or things like that. And these are just text files for the most part. I guess if because logging pictures as well, I guess they could get, pretty big over time. So I guess, yeah, I guess you had it for a very, 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 very long time, and you downloaded a very large number of pictures. I guess, I mean, this one here is almost a megabyte, but this one's here is 8K. So I don't know how you get 30 gigs, but wow, that's impressive. But anyway, should you ever feel like you don't want the old log files around anymore, and I don't know why you would want the old log files around, feel free to just go ahead and get rid of them or nuke them or whatever else. I mean, they're kind of interesting, sort of, a little bit, if that's your thing. It basically tells you, well, here's all the new cover images I downloaded. And like, wow, apparently that was the year that we downloaded the Akim by Monjournal, etc. So, wow, we really have been pushing the pictures, haven't we? Anyway, so yeah, I'm guessing picture downloads. It'll tell you things like, these are the pictures we downloaded, these are the new comic books that you added, deleted, moved around, etc. There's another set of log files which are called the unknown items logs, which is you can manually open those ones, and those are the ones that didn't match, which hopefully that's a largely solved problem for most of you guys, because it should auto match most of the stuff for you from time to time. But if not, then I guess you can get to that stuff directly. Anyway, so let's move on from that, and I think maybe it might be a good time to kind of wrap it up here, because like I said, I'm in the middle of things and I gotta get moving. Was there anything else? SSDs on old machines. Briefly about this one. So I did spend a fair amount of time with a very nice gentleman who was upgrading from a very old machine. And it was actually that situation we were talking about, where he had one drive that had the little tiny SSD on it, the little 256 megabyte SSD, and gigabyte SSD, and then he had a much larger conventional drive. And wow, it was. I mean, it's funny, because if this was the 10 years ago when that machine was probably built, I would have looked at it and say, well, that's fine. But I'm used to things working really fast these days, because again, if this is the speed I can get out of a $289 machine, you're thinking that's kind of your baseline life. But going back to mechanical drives was horrible. The other problem this gentleman had is he had very little RAM. So one thing that happens with your computer is if you have very little physical RAM in your hard drive, your computer will use your disk drive as an extension onto its RAM in order to be able to work with larger files, because you want to be able to not get stopped up because you just ran out of RAM. So it uses that, but unfortunately that is very slow, especially if it's called the paging file, where it uses the disk drive to back your RAM up. If that's located on your mechanical hard drive, then it's like a time traveling back to 2004, and it's not a good time. So what I'd say is, if you're in a situation where, first of all, number one, get an SSD, make it an NVMe SSD, which means one that is the more modern memory standard that can go much faster than the old. They're called PCI SSDs. They're about the size of a cell phone, give or take. But they would plug in the same place a disk drive would on your computer. The new ones slot in almost like a RAM. They don't slot in the RAM strips, but they slot in and they hook directly to the PCI bus on your computer, and they are so much faster even than the old SSDs. And meanwhile, the old SSD is so much faster than your hard drive. Not funny. But anyway, if you are in a situation where you have limited amount of space you can put on the SSD, the things you want to make sure for darn sure are on that SSD. You want to make sure Windows is on it. You want to make sure that ComicBase is on it. You want to make sure your ComicBase database is on it, and ideally, any other documents they're very important to you. But I mean, save what room you've got on your tiny SSD for those things, because databases are almost entirely, as they say, disk bound, which means the thing that makes you wait when you're working with a database, you're not waiting on your processor, you're not waiting on your RAM, you're waiting on your disk. And so you want that thing on the fastest possible disk you can put on. Now, if you're really tight for space, certainly feel free to move your backups. You can control in those preferences of ComicBase, you can control where your backup is saved. Go ahead and save your backup to your mechanical hard drive if that applies to you. Go ahead and save your picture files to the mechanical hard drive if you have no space left in the world. But honestly, these days, if I can get 2 terabyte SSD for $80, I honestly would just say, go get yourself a machine with a 1 or 2 terabyte SSD. You will thank me, and just tell the people at Best Buy that Pete said it was okay. You should do that, and your wife will understand, because your blood pressure will be so much lower. But yes, it's the difference between a computer that takes like 3 to 5 minutes to boot and one that boots in 20 seconds. So yeah, I bang on a lot about SSDs around here, but it needs saying. It's the thing that makes more difference in your computer than literally anything else you could be doing, is get yourself a real fast one. All right, so I think it's about all I want to say for now. So anyway, guys, we're gonna pack it in for now. We'll have other things to talk about in the next one. I gotta go and perform new feats of wonder, and then I gotta play poker tonight. So anyway, guys, have a great one, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.